The NBA draft lottery is tomorrow, and the Sacramento Kings have a 7.5% chance of winning the lottery. But that means they do have a chance. And if the Kings were to win the number one overall pick, what would they do with it? Well, I've been saying that I believe the Kings are going to be trading this year's pick. I've heard that the Kings will heavily be shopping this year's pick. And if they were to get number one overall, would they try and trade it? And if so, who could they get back for it? We'll talk about it on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by a brand new sponsor, Sakara Nutrition. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish. Go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code LOCKEDON20 for 20% off at checkout. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm looking forward to covering my ninth season covering the Sacramento Kings. That'll be next season. Very much excited about that. Very thankful for the last 8, even if they've been a struggle at times with how bad this Kings team has been. I currently work for ABC 10 News in Sacramento, and I love conversations like this. Now, I'll be honest with you. I desperately wish, that we didn't care so much about the draft lottery like the Kings do every single year. But at the same time, too, the day before, the hours before, the weeks before the draft lottery, there's an optimism. There's a hope. There's a what if the Sacramento Kings, even if they're a slim chance, what if they win the lottery? And we had kind of our what if moment back in 2018 when the Sacramento Kings moved all the way up from 8 to 2. And we know how that draft went. That's the last time I'm going to mention it. Sorry to hurt your feelings. Sorry to make you remember that. But this year, if they were to move up to number one overall, I believe Monte McNair and the Kings would get it right. But what is getting it right? Is it drafting a player? Is there a player in this draft, at the top of this draft, that Monte McNair and the Kings would absolutely fall in love with, who can help accomplish the goal of getting this team into the playoffs and winning games right away? Does that player exist? Or, like I believe is going to happen if the Kings end up with the 7th, 8th, or 9th pick, do the Kings trade that pick and try and bring in proven NBA talent or other NBA talent outside of the draft that help fill some of those holes and get this team to the playoffs? If you're looking at the draft and you believe that there is a player or a couple players at the top of the draft, I'm definitely interested in hearing that conversation. Or having that conversation and hearing what you think. And feel free to get loose in the comment section down below. If you're watching on YouTube, tweet me at MattGeorgeSack, email me mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. If you're like the Kings, if they had number one overall, they absolutely have to take Chet or they absolutely have to take Jabari. If that's you, tell me why. And you know what's cool about both those names that I brought up, both Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith Jr., both of these players are not only top of the draft level talent, you can make an argument for both of them, as well as Paulo Banchero. You can make an argument all three of those players should be the number one overall pick. In the case of Chet, and Jabari, and even Paulo, all three of those players fit a need for this Kings team. That's what's exciting, is that the top of this draft features talent, the best available talent potentially, that also fills your biggest need. Makes Monte McNair's job significantly easier as the drafter. That being said, if the Kings cash in on their 7.5% chance of moving up to number one overall, I still think they would do their homework or field phone calls or maybe even make phone calls to see what they could get in the trade market for number one overall. The number one overall pick rarely, if ever, gets moved. And if it does, usually it's after a player is selected. And that's important context because the number one overall pick or any draft pick has significantly more value before a selection is made than afterwards. It's like driving a brand new car off the lot. As soon as you drive off that lot, that value is changed. That value is different, right? It's significantly lower. What you're buying in a number one overall pick, or what you're trading for in a number one overall pick, is control. You get your pick of the litter in this draft, and you affect how the draft happens behind you. You affect what happens to other teams. That's what you're trading for in the number one overall pick. You're trading that privilege, really. You're trading for that privilege of being able to pick whoever you want from this draft class. So naturally, that pick is going to have significantly higher value, even if a number one overall pick isn't guaranteed to be a star. So it's not a guarantee that you would get a star in return for trading number one overall. I said this with Damian Barling. We were discussing this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about what if the Kings won the draft lottery. Trading the number one overall pick is actually significantly more difficult than trading like number 7 overall. I genuinely think if the Kings end up at number 7 overall, they're going to have a lot of offers, a lot of conversations, a lot of trades potentially on the table involving number 7. And I think number 7 plus a player like Rashawn Holmes or Harrison Barnes could actually net a pretty solid return for the Kings. But number 1, your expectations, your return is higher, but the amount of deals out there are significantly less. Because if you're trading number 1 overall, you are expecting to get a star caliber player, or if nothing else, a bona fide, proven NBA commodity. Let's put it this way. If the Kings were trying to trade for number 1 overall, and let's say the Oklahoma City Thunder had it, who cares? Detroit Pistons, who cares? I don't think any team really would trade number 1 overall for De'Aaron Fox. I could be wrong. De'Aaron Fox is a damn good player. He's a max player. Number 1 overall has more value probably than De'Aaron Fox, in my opinion. If I were in charge of another team and the Kings came to me and said, we'll give you De'Aaron Fox for number 1 overall, I'd say no. That's the value of the number 1 overall pick. That's how rare it is to trade number 1 overall. So the question I want to pose to you, and the question I pose to myself, and I throw this out there on Twitter as well. I actually just chatted about it with D'Lo and KC on ESPN 1320. If you have a list, right, of players that you would feel confident trading the number 1 overall pick for, or comfortable trading the number 1 overall pick for, I need to get this caliber player or this guy or these guys in order for me to move that pick. I don't care about who's at the top of your list, because the top of our list would all look the same. It would be like a Giannis Antetokounmpo or Luka Doncic, or players that are not going to be moved. Who's at the bottom of your list? Because that really gauges what the value is. Because the bottom of my list is still really good. And that means that the likelihood of the Kings being able to trade number 1 overall, if I were in charge, it probably wouldn't happen. I'd probably be taking a player. The bottom of my list is genuinely Brandon Ingram or Jaylen Brown. That's the bottom of my list. I might be able to be talked into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Maybe. A lot of people have said Davion Mitchell, or rather, I'm sorry, Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz star. To me, he's higher than Brandon Ingram or Jaylen Brown. Am I wrong for that? I probably am wrong for that. I don't know. Like, if I don't think that, I think it would be easier to get like a Jaylen Brown from Boston than it would be to get Donovan Mitchell from Utah. I don't know. Maybe that was a stupid thing to say, because the Jazz are maybe blowing it up because they got eliminated from the playoffs again, and the Boston Celtics are in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know. But to me, like, Donovan Mitchell is definitely on my list. I would trade number 1 overall for Donovan Mitchell in a heartbeat. I would also do it for Jaylen Brown or Brandon Ingram in a heartbeat. But those are damn good players, and it's going to take a lot to convince their teams to give up on those players, even if it is the number 1 overall pick that they're getting in return. That's the bottom of my list. I don't know if any of those teams do that, which means I'm probably selecting a player. And if this is the scenario we're playing out and I can't get those quality of players for number 1 overall and I'm making a selection, I personally am picking Jabari. I'm picking Jabari Smith Jr., but I would be interested in Chet. I'd be interested in Paulo. I might even take a look at Jaden Ivey, although probably not. Like, to me, I'm taking Jabari. I think he makes the most sense. He's my favorite player. I don't know if he's the closest one to a consensus number one overall pick in this draft. That also changes the value too. If this was the Zion draft, right, where we knew Zion was going number one overall, that changes the value of that number one overall pick. Versus in a draft like this, you can make an argument for 3 or 4 guys being number one overall picks, and that gives you power because you can really mess up the teams behind you. Let's say the Kings win the lottery, and we know the Detroit Pistons, who end up getting number 2, they're in love with Jabari, right? Maybe they're a little more desperate to move up to number 1. Or maybe there's a team out there that also is in love with Jabari who would be willing to give up more to get ahead of the Pistons in order to take Jabari. This is all in the realm of possibility. This is the freedom or the doors that the number 1 overall pick opens up. And when you are in control of that, there's a crap ton of value to that. That's why you don't trade the number 1 overall pick away unless you're getting as close to proven commodity value as you possibly can. Who's at the bottom of your list? And if you don't feel like you're going to be able to get those guys, who would you take with the number 1 overall pick if you were the Sacramento Kings? Again, the Kings have a 7.5% chance of actually winning the draft lottery, and they have a 32% chance of moving into the top 4. They can't get pick 5 or pick 6. They actually have over 40% chance of moving down in the draft to around 8 or 9. So they have a better chance of moving down than they do moving up. But 7% is 7%. It's a possibility. That's what's fun about the draft lottery. And speaking of the draft lottery, we're going to have a ton of draft lottery coverage for you. I'll be doing a specific draft lottery edition of Locked On Kings after we find out who the Kings or where the Kings end up, what their pick is. That'll be on tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast tomorrow night after the lottery is concluded. While the lottery is going on, the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NBA, is going to be hosting a draft lottery show, and I will be a part of that as well with the other lottery team hosts. So I hope you will join me for that. Plus, got more great content for you coming on Locked On Kings, including coming up in the next segment. There's another big piece of Kings news today, which is Monte McNair is going into the final year of his contract. And as of right now, according to Sam Amick of The Athletic, there's no conversation about an extension. I think the Kings would be foolish, completely foolish to not extend Monte McNair. I'll tell you why after I tell you more about, again, our new sponsor here of Locked On Kings, Sakara. If you're looking to feel your best, if you're looking for a meal plan that helps feed you, fills your belly up, and makes you feel good about yourself, Sakara is perfect for you. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools that you need to transform your life with their organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfast, lunches, and dinners are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients, helping boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, and get your skin glowing. Plus, it's all delivered right to your door, ready to eat. Sakara's functional, plant-rich wellness essentials help you create a body that you love living in. From their best-selling Metabolism Super Powder to the Foundation, their daily supplemental packs, Sakara's products are designed to support your wellness goals anytime, anywhere. And they have a great deal for Locked On Kings listeners right now. Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off of their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code lockedon20 at checkout. Again, that's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that just because Monte McNair hired Mike Brown and the Kings gave Mike Brown a 4-year deal, that McNair instantly deserves a contract extension equal to those 4 years. Like McNair, just like players have to earn their contracts, just like coaches have to earn their contracts, McNair has to earn a contract extension. And you could debate, I suppose, whether or not McNair has earned an extension to this point. You could argue that McNair has wasted the first 2 years here in Sacramento. I could also argue that he's dealt with 2 very different years, has dealt with a roster that mainly he inherited, had a coach for the longest time that he mainly inherited. Finally, he pulled the trigger on a big trade, brought in Domantas Sabonis, which is one of the biggest named players and most talented players the Kings have ever traded for. Certainly the most talented they traded for since Chris Webber. And in addition to that, he's 2 for 2 on his draft picks. I personally, this argument's easy for me to make. I think Monte McNair has done a good enough job to warrant an extension. It's less of a like pro Monte McNair argument, and I'm like team Monty, although I do believe that McNair is the best general manager the Kings have had since Jeff Petrie. That bar isn't very high, but I think that's easy for me to say, and I think that's factually true. In addition to that, like if the Kings need to look at stability here. Like, I know you don't just stick with a guy, stick with someone who is incapable of doing the job for the sake of stability, which maybe the Kings did with Vlade Divac when they offered him an extension. But it's hard to expect a first-time general manager to turn around a program that's so deep in the dumps that the Kings have been in, a 16-year playoff drought. It's hard to expect a general manager, a first-time general manager, to turn that around in 3 years, especially when, like we just discussed, he hasn't been able to hire his coach until after year 2. Although I don't know if it was his decision or not to bring back Luke Walton. All I know is that because he's the general manager and because he publicly committed to Luke Walton, that's on his resume at that point. That goes on his list. So McNair, I've said it before, would have been way better off firing Luke Walton last offseason and going through this whole coaching search last offseason. But alas, it didn't happen. Here we are. Really, McNair has been pretty stagnant, been pretty in the shadows, has not done too much until this past trade deadline. Now he's really starting to get going. And you could argue, well, what the hell has he been doing for 2 years? Again, I hear that argument. I understand it. But now he's starting to put his stamp on things here. And whether or not Mike Brown is the right hire at this point, or at least for this conversation, is kind of irrelevant because you gave Mike Brown a 4-year deal. And according to Sam Amick in this article, the fact that the Kings were not necessarily willing or had not made the decision yet to extend Monte McNair, that had an effect on some of the candidates and their opinions of the Kings job, because coaches don't want to come in here and be the next Luke Walton. They don't want to get hired and then a year or two into their new job, have their general manager fired, and then here they are sitting in no man's land. And by the way, that's happened twice. This would be the third time. If Monte McNair is not brought back, if the Kings fire Monte McNair at the end of this season or before his contract is up, if they don't give him an extension, if he's done after this season, even if it's a losing season, the Kings would be looking for another general manager. It would be the third time in the Vivek Ranadive era, less than 10 years, the third time that the Kings had a head coach under contract on staff before hiring their general manager. Third time's a charm, I guess. Absolutely not. It's a recipe for disaster. It would fail. It would be stupid. It would be idiotic. Monte McNair, to me, deserves to be extended at least 1 year, because McNair's timeline doesn't equate to or isn't on the same level or shouldn't be parallel to Mike Brown's timeline. Not yet. Brown just signed a 4-year deal. I am okay with Monty not getting a 3-year extension right now. I'm okay with it. But Monte McNair's name and job should be completely attached to Domantas Sabonis. Completely attached to Sabonis. As long as Domantas Sabonis is in Sacramento, Monty will be synonymous with him. When Monte McNair traded Tyrese Halliburton, and also important to note, when Monte McNair traded the years of control over Tyrese Halliburton for 2 and some change years of Domantas Sabonis, it basically became, Monty, you have these 2 years left to convince Sabonis to re-sign. You have 2 years to get this team to a place where they're winning games and Sabonis wants to be here long term. That's his timeline to me. So if the Kings think that after trading for Sabonis, even if this next season is a losing season and they fire him and they have 1 year left of Sabonis with a new general manager who Sabonis doesn't know, and 3 years left of Mike Brown, who this new general manager inherits, if you think that's a better alternative than giving McNair a 2 or 3 year contract extension right now, I don't know what the hell to tell you. That would be terrible. Really bad for the Kings. Really, really bad. So Monty, in my opinion, should at least get a 1-year extension or should be put on the same timeline as Domantas Sabonis. If Sabonis does not work out here, he's gone. No issue saying that whatsoever. Even if I like him, no problem. Like that, you're hitching your wagon to Domantas Sabonis. If that doesn't work out, and by the way, Sabonis is I think Bobby Marks talked about this on the Deuce and Mo podcast. Sabonis is not going to sign a contract extension with the Kings. He'll get less money than if he tests unrestricted free agency in 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean that as an unrestricted free agent, he won't choose to come right back to Sacramento. He just gets the opportunity to get what is probably going to be the last massive contract or the biggest contract of his career. That's probably what he's getting in this upcoming free agency period, or these in 2 seasons as an unrestricted free agent. It's a bidding war versus if he, at least as far as my understanding of the CBA works, if he agrees to a contract extension with the Kings, there's a cap of how much money he can make. So, or there is a cap as a free agent too, but it's less than the money that he can make as an extension. Regardless, if Sabonis is here, Monte McNair should be here. If Sabonis is gone, Monte McNair should be gone. It's that simple to me, and it should be that simple to the Kings. Let me know what you think about that. At Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Before we wrap up, also want to tell you about another great sponsor of Locked On Kings. You've heard me talk about them time and time again. I'm talking about Built Bar, and Built Bar has a new puff, birthday cake puffs. It's the perfect timing. It's my birthday month. My birthday is next week, and I finally have gotten to try these birthday cake puffs, and they are delicious. Imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories. Yeah, the deliciousness, but also good for you. And it also has 16 grams of protein in it. The Built Bar Puffs, they're protein-infused marshmallows. That's a real thing. Protein-infused marshmallows. That, in addition to their amazing Built Bars that are basically chocolate-covered candy bars that are, again, really good for you, like 150 calories, 16 grams of protein in each bar. It's a no-brainer compared to like a 240-calorie candy bar. They're made with love. They're made with a variety of flavors for you picky eaters out there. I'm a picky eater too. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. If you order puffs, if you order bars, get a mixed box, order the specific flavors that you want. Regardless, you can take advantage of this offer. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. I have to mention before we go, did you see Alvin Gentry has a new role for the Sacramento Kings? No, he wasn't fired. He has 1 year left on his contract, and he will serve that year as part of the Kings front office as the vice president of basketball engagement. I have no clue what that is. Anybody know what the hell basketball engagement is? Does that mean that he's going to be in charge of all the proposals in arena? Basketball engagement? Is that it? I have no idea what Alvin Gentry is going to be doing. I don't know if this is a ceremonial position or not. It kind of sounds like it is. Alvin Gentry is a great guy. He's very well respected. I'm glad that he's still going to be part of the Kings organization in some capacity. I don't know how significant it's going to be. This might be the last time we see Alvin Gentry's name brought up, period. I don't know. But, okay. Congratulations, Mr. Vice President of Basketball Engagement. Happy you're here in Sacramento. In all seriousness, Alvin Gentry is a great guy. Did not deserve some of the crap that he had to deal with as the associate head coach last season. And I mean when I said, like, he's a good guy to have as part of your organization. So I hope he actually does have some sort of role, as long as it's not a advisor role that has more power and undermines other people, which I don't think it is. I'm just being facetious. You're probably expecting or probably wondering, if you listen to the last Locked On Kings podcast on Saturday, you're probably wondering why I'm not doing a mailbag episode, which I said I was going to do. A lot of that has to do with all of the different topics that kind of arose this week, or at least today, with the trade deadline being tomorrow, the draft lottery being tomorrow. I'm pushing the mailbag to later on this week. That means you still have time to send in your questions. At Matt George Sack on Twitter, email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. You can even ask them on the YouTube comment section. Send me questions for a mailbag episode. I haven't done a mailbag in a long time. I will do an episode of Locked On Kings mailbag later on this week. And then again, tomorrow, post Locked On Kings edition or draft lottery edition of Locked On Kings. And then also you can hang out with all of the Locked On draft lottery hosts during our Locked On Draft Lottery show that we're doing tomorrow night as well. I really hope you will join me for that. And remember, I'm doing a bit of a giveaway right now. If we can get, by the start of next season, if we can get over 350 reviews on the Locked On Kings Apple Podcasts page or iTunes page, then I will give away a pair of tickets to opening night. We are at like 290 something. We're just on the cusp of 300. All you have to do is create an account if you don't have one already. It takes no time at all. Even if you're a Spotify listener, just create an account really quick. Go over there, leave a review. Hopefully it's 5 stars. There's a little box for you to put a custom review in there. And if we get over 350, or if we get to 350, I will give away a pair of tickets to opening night. And then I'll let you know by that point how you'll be eligible to win those tickets. So please help me do that. Again, it takes no time at all on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Just look up Locked On Kings, create an account, leave a review. Really would appreciate that. It helps us get the Locked On Kings podcast out there, helps us get exposure. I really, really, really would appreciate it. And again, let me know what you would do with the number 1 overall pick, who you would trade the pick for, who's at the bottom of your list, who you would select with number 1 overall if you made a selection. And let me know what you think about Monte McNair's contract situation as well. Appreciate your support as always. Thank you for joining me. Can't wait to have you join me for the draft lottery tomorrow. The Kings are going to cash in on that 7.5% chance. Let's speak it into existence here. Appreciate you so much. My name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.